Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. I want to start off this round with Dr. Mahana Meheva. Dr. Mahana Meheva, before we went for a short commercial break, you were talking about how those in this government are also corrupt. What happened with regard to the bond scam? When you look at the judgment that has been passed down to the former Secretary of State, we want to go one step ahead. The former governor of the central bank and also his son-in-law, what sort of sentence has to be meted out against these two individuals in question? Now, you're a lawyer.
Yeah, actually I can't make premature judgments. But I think this commission, only they have the lifetime, another 2 months. Thereafter you have to prepare the report. After preparing the report, what will happen? The Attorney General has to indict them. But I think there is another report prepared by COPE committee, that report also with the Attorney General. Now, when framing charges, I can't actually imagine what is the fine or compensation that should be paid if they become liable to that. And then once again, who will collect that money? So the same thing can happen. The same practice can happen if it happens. So my argument is still, we have to see. But there are certain consequences. One minister had to resign, and there were other names are also coming up in these cases. So this is only, don't forget Shamir, this is only just like a preliminary inquiry or a fact-finding mission. With that they will prepare the report and submit. After the case only we have to see really what has happened. So I don't want to make any premature judgment, but I can't imagine whatever the fine or the compensation which will come.
Dr. Mahana Meheva, with regard to the bond commission itself, we saw in one of the messages sent by Arjun Aloysius to his CEO was that I have friends in higher places. Now the most important thing right now is not two people. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Now where is the iceberg itself? Now that's important to identify, isn't it? Who gave these directions? Who gave this information? There is someone within the government itself who has this information and who has given it. Don't you think so?
Yeah, this also may come after the bond case go to High Court, and once the High Court give the judgment, a person may come and tell. Either one who gave the orders, either one who gave this direction. Until that time you have to wait. But exactly who was the minister in charge of this area? The Honorable Prime Minister. That's the thing. So therefore, the liability also partly he has to take. But still, I can't comment on that because presumption of innocence is there. Until that, we can't say anything. But finally, who paid the compensation? Former Minister of Finance. He has to resign from that. So we have to wait. We can't tell.
Dr. Mahana,
before any investigation, I am not an investigator. So I can't tell any premature decision.
Dr. Mahana Meheva, we all know that even though the finance minister has had to resign, and that's a sort of fine that the government has to pay, we see that in the back door, the former finance minister is holding many key positions within the government itself. He has been put into look into regional development as a senior member of the United National Party. So is all this acceptable? It seems like they're trying to sweep under the carpet the wrongdoings.
Yeah, that is not the way a good governor should work. And also I think a new office had been given to him in one proper place. So he is directing, and he has visited certain places, and he is donating certain amount also for certain type of development. But I think these should be controlled, because if you resign from that place, one of the ministers said you have to wait for rehabilitation. Once you rehabilitate, you can take a
Thank you very much.
post.
Thank you very much,
it is
Dr.
not the way you have to go for rehabilitation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahana Meheva. Mr. Newsfirst.lk, interesting facts. You know, you have the Prime Minister himself who is directly involved in all this, and more, it seems like that because he was the minister in charge of the central bank at that time. My question to you is a bit different. I want to drag your attention to the Greek bonds that took place, that happened. Many individuals are saying that there was no losses that were incurred to the country through the Greek bonds, but the losses are colossal. And you have the former governor of the central bank coming and saying, I am willing and ready to come and justify before the bond commission about the losses that are made with regard to the central bank bond controversy. But my argument and my question has always been, has the former governor been able to calculate the losses that Sri Lanka made as a loss of investing in Greek bonds? But he comes and says that he can testify before the commission on the present bond scandal.
Yeah, but his main defense and explanation is that this is a matter that has gone before the Supreme Court and there has been a judgment, because the Supreme Court, what they held there was, this is totally dissimilar to the bond issue. You know, bond issue is something that where a party or some group of parties are benefited by something. Now in this case, it is a loss to the country by doing some exercise which he should not have done. I mean, that is the assessment. Why did he go and invest in Greek bonds? He did
negative ratings at that time.
That is the thing. So, but he says there are other areas where he invested and they made huge profits. In compared to those profits, at that time, it was worth taking a risk and investing these monies to see whether the return would be good. But it happened the other way. But I want to just touch on one thing Dr. Pratibha Mahanam said. You know about the responsibility arising out of this bond thing. The commission very clearly, I was there, we were following very carefully. The commission very carefully sorted that issue by asking, okay, who is the ultimate authority? Who can decide on this information matter? Or based on this information, the final result, who is the ultimate authority? The governor of the central bank. They very clearly pointed in the course of that evidence leading that, they determined that the information that should have come from that top, and that is the top that was able to decide on that based on that information. So that point must be very clearly taken, because they very pinpointedly ask, who is the final authority who can decide finally on this granting of this or approving at what rate? It was the governor at the monetary board level. I mean, he submits it to the monetary board much later. He decides, because tender board submits it to him. He can turn it down at his level even if the tender board approves it. But finally it gets approved there. So the information to be meaningful has to come from a source that can finally affirm it. That is the important point.
Mr. Nakon, with regard to this central bank bond controversy that has taken place, we see some whistleblowers within the central bank itself coming up with this information. I recollect Dr. Vijayavardhana very clearly on this very show saying that he got the information about the bond transaction from a colleague of his. He of course did not mention who it was, but he said that he got the information also from a colleague. So there are some good civil servants in the central bank, because I recollect some individual had gone and told the governor, I don't want to even sign this because he is wrong. And that is why the governor had to sign that piece of paper at the end of the day. So you have some very strong civil servants in the central bank even to date.
Certainly yes, and hats off for them, because it is they who played this important role. They publicized even the names of the people who could be suspected in this transaction. What is transpiring today at the commission? Those very names, the names that they have mentioned in their whistleblowing process are surfacing, and they are being questioned. They are being charged, virtually charged like now. So therefore, the whistleblowers played their role with no legal guarantee, with no legal assurance in this country. There is no law to prevent or safeguard the whistleblowers. But still, they took a chance. They released the unofficial version of the central bank report about the profits that perpetual treasuries made at a time when that information was privy only to the people who conducted that investigation. The whole country was shocked. The rate at which they were making profits at that time. And who should get the credit for that? The whistleblowers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vijayapal Tennakon. So, basically what Mr. Tennakon and Dr. Vijayapal and also Mr. Krishna Baranasuri along with Dr. Mahana Mehwa are saying is, you don't have to worry if you are a civil servant and if you're doing your duty right. You're doing your duty for the country. You're doing your duty to your fellow countrymen. And you have to stand strong on behalf of the public of this nation. I now move my attention to Dr. W. Vijayawardena, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Dr. Vijayawardena, when you really look at all these events that are transpiring right now in the Central Bank, I recollect one day when we were doing this story, I called you up and you told me, Shamir, not even a fly can go on top of the Central Bank, not even a crow can fly over the Central Bank without the governor's knowledge. And now that has been proven. What must you say? I've never got your feeling about what is happening right now at the Commission. I want to give you the next 3 minutes to express what you feel about all these incidents that has taken place and where it is now, Dr. Vijayawardena.
In fact, Shamir, as Mr. Vijayapal Tennakon has very correctly pointed out, most of the things that are surfacing at the Commission now had been released to the market by the whistleblowers in the Central Bank. And they were in all these unofficial reports that they had put out. And exactly what the Commission is presently doing is it's actually following the information that had been contained in those reports today, and now we have the authentic evidence to prove what the whistleblowers had said. So, and about the Commission, of course, what I feel, Samir, is that the Attorney General's Department, Crown Councils and all the senior officers who are serving there, they are actually doing a great job of work for the nation, and the whole nation will have to respect and give their appreciation to them, because I know that they work 24 hours a day and 7 days a week, and it's not something which you can expect from a public servant. And they are perusing thousands and thousands of pages of evidence, information, and then grasping that information, the following day coming before the Commission and asking those questions. So they deserve our appreciation as people who are doing a great job there. The commissioners themselves have to do a very difficult job, because the bond issues are not something which many people are aware and familiar with, and as a result they have to study what the subject matter, and now they are also doing a great job. So we expect a good report from the Commission, and once the Commission report is out, it is up to the Attorney General's Department to pursue the matter further. So this is where it stands today. But when it comes to assigning the responsibility within the central bank, what is presently prevailing in the central banking culture, Samir, is which is not a good thing, because as I told you, the governor actually exercises the job of an absolute monarchy there. And
even the president?
Even, I mean, the governor's job is that, Krismal, I mean, always the governors have been had extensive powers over the career prospects, the life and death of the workers in the central bank, and as a result he was treated like a god. So that is why the Governor Mahendran had gone down to the Public Debt Department, given those orders. But fortunately for us, two officers, Mr. Asim and Mrs. Deepa Senivaratna, they had objected to it. And once they have objected to it, the Governor could not continue to have his own words being carried out, but of course he had to come to a compromise. So he had agreed for a half the amount that had been originally decided by him to be taken out of the bond auction.
Dr. Vijayardhana, are you happy that there are civil servants like that in the central bank?
In
even
fact,
today?
Samir, during my career I have found so many. I mean, not only that, I mean, Deepa Seneviratne and Dr. Asim have been brought up to that particular position by the very high culture that the central bank had in the past, because I know personally there had been many central bank officers who had exercised their dignity, their honesty, and also they had conducted their affairs with integrity and also with great honor.
Thank you very much, Dr. W. Vijayardhana. Before I move to Attorney at Law, Mr. Krishna Varansurya, I need to mention to all our viewers today that when I first spoke to Dr. Vijayardhana on the central bank bond controversy, he gave us the plot. I recollect him saying, Shamir, look no further, read John Nexter's report. When the governor's role is questioned, when his integrity is questioned, he does not no longer have the right to serve as the governor of the central bank. And I still recollect him calling me the next day and telling, remember Shamir, the governor of the central bank is a CEO of that bank in question and he has to take responsibility. Dr. Vijayardhana, thank you very much for enlightening me at that time in March 2015 about this information, and as a result of that, only this incidents, what was transpired, the governor's removal, all that and more had taken place as a result of that expose. So I want to salute Mr. Rusirpal Thandakon as well for coming out and being candid and expressing their thoughts when the Bond Commission is sitting. I think as a network we are very happy to see at least some justice is being meted out for you sitting at home. I want now move my attention to Mr. Krishna Varansurya, Attorney at Law, as well as the Joint Secretary of the People's Intellectual Assembly. I'm going to ask you a question that probably may not be quite apt to ask from a lawyer, but I'm still going to ask you this question, Mr. Varansurya. Conflict of interest. Now, you have Gamini Marapanna, who is the brother of Tilak Marapanna, who is now the Minister of Foreign Affairs, appearing for Mr. Arjun Aloysius. Now, at the look of it, it may not seem wrong, but as a lawyer, you know what the culture is and you know how things work out. How ethical is this? I'm not going to ask you about laws, regulations, nothing. Do you think such practices are ethical?
Yes. Since you mentioned the name, I have the highest regard for Mr. Gamini Marapanna, Senior Counsel, who we appear to, even last weekend we appeared together in the 20th Amendment matter. But Shamir, you must remember this. Why I say it's ethical is because we are bound, Pratibha and I, all of us who administer that oath, are bound by a code of ethics that say we cannot refuse a brief except in 3 given situations. I don't want to go into the legality of it. One is professional embarrassment, 2 is if there is a conflict. That is, the conflict must not be what the public think it's a conflict. Conflict is that I should have either taken the other side of that same brief, or I should be in a position to evaluate and see. Now I don't want to go into personal things here, but now recently Rusiri and I were having a discussion on a similar matter, where I found that if I went ahead with that matter, there would be a conflict. And therefore we had a discussion. So it's up to the lawyer to see whether if because of another stance that you have taken in the same matter, or because of any other reason, such as I said, the other thing is if the client can't afford your fee, so then you can refuse to accept a brief. So these are some on the very limited grounds on which we can refuse a brief. If not, whatever the public may think, whatever, you all will remember that some time back there was the dear departed Mr. Erdlipper, President's Counsel, who went to Kalutara. People started stoning his vehicle because he was appearing for a man who was accused of child molestation. Now that I say is wrong. The people have misunderstood the law. Even Marusira needs to be represented in court by a lawyer. That doesn't mean that the lawyer is Marusira. The lawyer is representing Marusira. You follow? And that is the law. That's a basic fabric of the law that we are governed by, that everyone is presumed innocent until proven guilty, and to prove your innocence or defend that you are not guilty, you need the assistance of someone learned in the letters of law, LLB.
It's a fundamental right.
It's a fundamental right. So I don't think that we should cast aspersions on Mr. Marapan or anyone else. But on the other side, you remember, even the top law is defending you. If the commission takes on its task in the manner that it is supposed to, the man will be in the report. The commission will find the findings against that man. That's the answer to your question.
In terms of conflict of interest, we see this happening within the government ranks a couple of times. Why?
In the government ranks, you mean?
Example,
the situation that you're referring to?
Example, I can tell you a clear incident. Gamini Marapana's brother, Tilak Marapana, stepping down from the cabinet a few years ago, when there was the avant-garde incident that took place.
In your sister channel at Saturn on the avant-garde, I remember discussing the same issue. There, the question was, he was a member of the executive and a minister of law and order, if I'm correct, now. But as a counsel in court, he had defended this client, this same client, and had appeared for him in several matters. Therefore, which were connected. Now, therefore, there was a question: how can you, who defended the same client in the judiciary, the judicial arm of government, come to the executive arm of government and then be in control of a ministry that is prosecuting this same individual? That was the conflict. Now, there was a clear conflict, and he made the choice, and he withdrew from his portfolio. He withdrew from the portfolio because of the avant-garde issue, and that is where the conflict was created there.
I think
a very quick question.
I think in this issue, there is no conflict of interest between Honorable Gamini Marapana and whatever the.
No, right now there's a discussion. Right now there's a discussion about this. But I want to again drag your attention to 2004, the assassination of Sarat Ambepitiya, one of the learned judges in Sri Lanka.
Sad event.
Sad event. No lawyer appeared for Pottanauva apart from just one lawyer who said, I will take up the case. Then what happened to all these three incidents in which lawyers don't accept briefs about? I'm trying to figure out.
Of course,
I said
it then, I say it now, that it was wrong. It was wrong, it is wrong. Lawyers should have appeared for the man, but remember, since you mentioned the incident, Halsdorf, we are regular travelers to Halsdorf Hill, even the most hardcore murderers don't say a word to lawyers. That's how the system functions. You follow? Because even they know that they have to be defended by lawyers. So when someone comes and hits that, I mean, it was just like the impeachment a few years later. When you touch that sanctified place of Halsdorf and kill a sitting judge for no other than a pending inquiry, lawyers also are human beings. I'm not saying what they did was right. I may have made that same choice. I say I'm not going to defend someone who touched it.
So there are instances in
of
which,
course, there are instances,
that
but
judges,
you cannot
that lawyers have not appeared.
Shami, I think that's a very hypothetical stretch of imagination. If you are comparing the assassination of a sitting High Court judge, going to His Honour Justice Ambepitiya, and this man who has in broad daylight stolen money, which all of us know, if not for the footnote.
No, because you mentioned about three incidents in which, but this incident was not covered in that.
No,
that's what I'm trying to say.
Presidential Commission of Inquiry and Gamini Marapana taking on a brief for a client has absolutely, I think, it is a fast set of hypotheses from Sarat Ambepitiya's murder where lawyers refuse to appear. You see, I'll ask you a question. You're a lawyer. Someone comes home, attacks your house, and say kills one of your family members. Then are you going to appear for that person?
But the person who did that can go to another lawyer.
Of course he can go to another lawyer.
Yeah.
But this is Halsdorf.
That person won't come to me.
I know this is Halsdorf. Halsdorf Hill High Court. a respected judge, someone that all of us, and more than
No,
the judge. Let me finish. Let me finish the answer. More than the judge, the system. That's why I said, even the hardcore criminals, when they walk into that court of law, they bow down, they respect that they are before the law, and that's the way the system functions. And that system.
So there are instances. There are instances like that.
No, that is not an instance at all. I'm sorry, I don't agree with you. Here was a situation where someone took the law into their own hands. They thought that by killing a judge, you could curtail the law. You can't do that. One judge falls, 10 appear. Didn't you mention this? I remember when one of our colleagues' houses was attacked by a grenade in 2010. I remember leading a procession with very senior President's Counsel from Halsdorf. And we said the same that day. He said, you try to kill one lawyer, 100 more will rise.
But where were all these lawyers? Okay, where were all these lawyers? No, I agree with you.
No, I'm answering your question. Yeah. You can't compare.
Okay, let's say
for this criminal.
I do agree with you. But what happened when the impeachment of Shirani Bandaranaike took place? Where were the lawyers then? Tell me how many lawyers were on the road.
Remember the lawyers walking out in
how many lawyers? How many lawyers were there, Mr. Baranasuriya?
Look at your clipping. I didn't keep the number.
Mr. Baranasuriya, they were sitting in the courts at this time.
No, I think you got your news wrong there. 2010, I was one of those lawyers who regularly appeared in that case. I think I was one of the very junior lawyers who appeared, the only non-president's counsel who appeared in one of those cases, and I was nominated by the very senior people to talk to you all, to the media, and say what is happening in the courtroom. And I remember the processions that came from Halsdorf.
So there were no two sides to it. Everyone was united on this. All lawyers were united on this?
Across the board, we found that majority of lawyers are united. Yes, I take what you say. There was a clan of lawyers who decided that her ladyship should be impeached.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's the answer that I was looking at, Mr. Baranasuriya.
Shamir, there is another one point I just want to add. Now, even if there is no lawyer for the defendant, the learned High Court judge appoint at least a junior and the state pay for him.
Yes, I agree with you. That's a normal practice.
Yeah, that's a normal practice. Yes. So it is also fundamental right to give the legal aid. United Nations Human Rights Council, all these conventions it say. So that is your talent.
My question is about conflict of interest, because
I agree.
Most of the time, Dr. Mahanan, what we see is a split. No fraternity in Sri Lanka are voicing their concerns together. Let's say the Saitam issue for an example, which you have been very vocal on.
Okay.
How many factions are there on the Saitam issue?
Yeah.
Or everyone can unite and say, okay, either we want it, either we don't want it. But there are factions.
Have you ever heard lawyers had gone on strike? Have you ever heard lawyers have gone on strike?
Yes.
It was there when Honorable Vijayadas Linaraji was killed. That day, so there are incidents like that. So you can't say every time this is coming up with conflict of interest.
Shamir, just a 30-second answer to that BPT question. You may find that those lawyers would have had a conflict. You know how? They would have thought, if we feel that we can refuse a brief, they would have thought, I will not do justice to this client now if I appear in this case, because I have so much anger against him for doing what he did.
Thank you.
And that's a conflict.
Thank you very much.
That's a conflict.
I open the floor for questions from our journalists. So it's all just, let's start off with Nadir.
Starting with me. We go ladies first.
Okay. Alright. Thank you, Nadir.
I want more time at the end.
Okay. Dr. Vijayabardhan, last week we saw another policy document as to how the economy should be steered forward. Do you know which plan is this? Like, is it the third or the fourth under the present government? And do they have enough time to execute a plan, carry it forward?
Yeah, in terms of the number, Charita, is the fourth plan.
It's a gazette.
Fourth document, because the first one was announced in the election manifesto of the United National Party in August 2015, where it had provided the basic economic structure and the policy structure that it would be following after they were elected to power. Then in November 2015, the economic policy statement of the government was delivered by the Prime Minister in Parliament, outlining again the policy structure that they would be following in the next 3 to 4 year period. Subsequent to that, in 2016 also, in October, a similar economic policy statement was delivered by Prime Minister in Parliament, and this is the fourth one. And what I find, Charita, is that all the four documents actually present the same thing. The same structure, same policy package, and if you look at the Vision 2025, it is based on the economic ideology of the government, which is called the knowledge-based, highly competitive social market economic policy, which is the guiding principle in policy Vision 2025 also. Then all the other reforms that the Vision 2025 had proposed had already been proposed in the first economic policy statement also by the Prime Minister. So what we presently see is that none of these previous three policy documents had been implemented by the government, and in midway through they have come up with another document which is now in printed form and beautifully produced, and therefore they are going to present the same thing again to the electorate.
Why do you think they're presenting the same plan again at this point of time?
There is no necessity for them to do that, because if they had actually carried out the first economic policy statement, there is no any necessity for them to redo it in their midterm now. But of course the present one, we see there are two targets. There is an intermediate target to be realized by the government by year 2020, and there are final targets to be realized by the government in year 2025. And both 2020 and 2025 are election years for Sri Lanka, and therefore this has been prepared in terms of the election cycle of the country. That's one thing. Second one was, in the first economic policy statement delivered in Parliament by Prime Minister, it was a very long-term plan. It was a plan for 30 years, which has to be realized by year 2045. And Prime Minister said that Sri Lanka would be a developed country by year 2025. Now this is similar to this accelerated Mahawali scheme introduced by Jayajayawardena. The whole 30-year Mahawali scheme was accelerated to a 6-year period. And similar to that, in the Vision 2025, what we find is the long target which had been envisaged in the first statement for 2045 have been brought forward to year 2025 now. Now the government thinks that it can make Sri Lanka a rich country, joining the rich country club within a 8-year period.
So Dr. Now, if there's a regime change again, and also, I mean, when you see a number of plans within a short period of time, do you think it would be taken seriously by investors?
No, I mean, it's a risk, of course, because we don't know what would happen at the general election in year 2020, and if there is another government is voted into power, probably that government may not follow the Vision 2025 which had been prepared by the previous government. So there's a risk always. But of course, if you go through the Vision 2025 Charita, it is actually a wish list so far. I mean, there are so many wishes which the government has introduced, and each and every wish which is contained in the Vision 2025 has to be now developed into a concrete plan.
Dr. Wijayawardena, as an economist, as someone who has studied and taught economics, you would say that Sri Lanka is, the state at least, is heavily burdened by debt. So do you think that this 8-year plan to get rich quick is feasible?
I mean, you are correct, Nadeem. I mean, if you don't have to be an economist to figure this out. Now, in terms of the World Bank classifications, a rich country is a country where the per capita income, the average income of a citizen, is more than $12,000. The per capita income in Sri Lanka today is $4,000, which means we have to increase our per capita income 3 times within a period of 8 years. Now, in order to attain that particular target, we must have an economic growth of about 16% per annum. And present economic growth is even less than 4%. So it's a very challenging task for the government to deliver the promise of making Sri Lanka a rich country in an 8-year period. because you have to increase the rate of economic growth from less than 4% to 16% over the next 8-year period.
Mr. Tennecoon, I have a question for you regarding the Vision 2025 document. We are still waiting on local government elections, which are now several years late. The absence of local government elections is being blamed for numerous problems, including the severity of the dengue epidemic, problems with waste management, basic public services. Now it appears that there is an attempt also to postpone provincial council elections. Whether it is a genuine attempt to foster good governance by having elections on the same day, or whether it is a deliberate attempt to postpone provincial council elections, it appears that provincial council elections are to be postponed. Do you think that we can start using the Vision 2025 document as a timetable to predict when the elections will be held?
In my own opinion, Nadeem, now as things are happening in this country, I don't see anybody taking this economic plan seriously. This is like government gazettes, if you have to compare it. One gazette followed by the other one. Sometimes there are repetitions, because the fact that there are repetition shows that there is no necessity for another proclamation of another plan. They would have stuck to the first one if there is no change. The second one becomes important, or the new one becomes important if there is anything new in it. Now what they are doing is, first you project it for 40, 30 years, second time you project it for another length of time, now you shorten it, because people are not believing this. They have seen so many things failing. With regard to the elections, the people in power will choose the best time to hold the elections that suits them, which they think will be the correct time for them to return their people to power. So with various gimmicks and exercises, they will take decisions to put it off. It's as simple as that. This is a layman's point of view. This is what we see as citizens of this country.
Mr. Tennecoon, do you think that lawmakers actually go through these strategies, these elaborate plans? Do they read through them? Do they comprehend what's on these reports? Is the two political parties in the same?
Can I rephrase that question? Yeah. Does the politicians now in power even understand what on earth are on these reports?
No, I mean the answer is very simple. Did the presenter of this economic plan discuss this with the politicians in the first place? Before it was formulated and put forward? Never. Why is this magic coming from the sky? That from day one when you present this, there is a conflict. People are talking against it, people are talking for it, people are bringing amendments, people are saying it cannot be, it is incredible, cannot be. All this can be settled by one exercise. That is, if we have 225 with or without SSC many, they can be put to one place, brought to one place. They can be told, this is the plan that we are going to put forward for the sake of the country. This is not the Prime Minister's plan. We don't want a plan from the Prime Minister. We want a plan for the country. Discussed by the legislators, participated by the legislators, contributed by the legislators.
May I have 30 seconds just to add to a little question to that? Forget Vision 2025. Can you, like in our grade 5 books, the Mala went to the market, bought 5 vegetables, set up 5 questions to be answered by 225 legislators. What is executive power? What is legislative power? What is sovereignty? What is independence of the judiciary? And throw in one more in there, what is the responsibility of opposition? Ask these 5 questions from 225, ask, see how many of them can answer.
Dr. Mahanameva, is this because of the level of education of our parliamentarians?
Yes.
That they don't understand this?
Another thing, before answering that question, may I elaborate? One of the senior minister representing Sri Lanka Freedom Party openly said, and he was really frustrated, all these plans like a one-man show. Who is going to promote this? Whose ideas? Even there is a collective responsibility in the cabinet. We are unaware. So they are crying in front of the executive president. So this is where we can see, if this go to executive prime minister, this is worse than executive president one day, if this constitution is coming up. And the other one is education, yes. Now, I would like to raise this. Forget about the education.
Everyone doesn't need a degree.
Yes. How many, now May to July, there were 21 times parliament sessions. There are more than 18 members who has not participated, even 5.
Because they don't understand what's going on there.
Let's see. Your 5 questions are great. But I am going to tell you, they have to sit now, Rishman. They have to sit. They are not sitting in the parliament. Honorable Arumugan Thondaman only 1 time. Palani Digambaram only how many times?
Actually, go for the
the minister, deputy minister, higher education, Grero, how many times? Only 2 times. So they have to sit here, Krishman. Other than that,
go to the canteen and have the lunch and come.
So, Dr. Mahalaya, but I thought, based on the constitution, if a parliamentarian does not appear in parliament for 3 months or more,
there is a ruling like that. I don't know whether they have taken or not. But the issue is this. Plantation industry, plantation sector, all these people are suffering.
Because we saw Domingo Silva being granted leave on many instances.
Shall I put in another way? Sometimes all these ministers' questions are answered by Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Ministers are silent.
So he's the only one who knows the answer. The ministers don't know.
So that's the answer to Mr.
Wijewardena. Dr. Wijewardena, were you able to go through the Vision 2025 document, and because you're an economist, how technical is the content?
Actually, Charita, it has been prepared in a highly technical language which can be understood only by people who have done economics at a very high level. For example, they are talking about this the inflation targeting, talking about direct taxes, talking about contributory pension schemes and so forth. And all these things have to be translated into layman's language, and then they have to be first communicated to the members of parliament, cabinet ministers, as Dr. Mahanama is saying. But cabinet ministers will have to be first educated, because otherwise they might be speaking 2 languages. If they speak 2 languages, then it's not good for the plan. So these, as I told you, every wish that the particular document contains will have to be developed into a concrete plan. Then the plan will have to be translated into layman's language, and then it should be communicated to everybody. I mean, the MP, cabinet ministers, members of the public, bureaucracy, and so forth.
So how do you prepare the parliament and the public when you launch an economic plan? How does it happen in other countries?
You have to have, it should be a multi-log, I mean not a dialogue, Pratibha, it's a multi-log, because you have to receive actually the suggestions from various groups, various members of the various representative groups.
And an answer to that, in other countries, all cabinet members have think tanks. Economist in that, a lawyer in that, engineer in that, and they are paid, because we don't expect everyone to have degrees, right? Of course, Singapore has. Singapore, all cabinet members have master's degrees. But we don't, let's not go there. Let's at least have utter pass, but utter pass able to understand what someone educated is telling you. So they have a think tank, and when policy like this comes, you can't, as Dr. Wijewardena says, highly economic. So you can't have people who think megapolis is some big police force going into a policy like this and understanding it. You have to have a think tank who will explain it to them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Varasuri. But before I go in for a short commercial break, I want to give an opportunity to Mr. Visripal Thinnakon to comment on this and express his views. I want to again go back to one of my earlier questions that I posed to Mr. Varasuri about conflict of interest. Now, this is something that is plaguing as far as this government is concerned. Conflict of interest happening with regard to Vijayadasa Rajapaksa, who is a President's Counsel. Tilak Marapana, who is still a President's Counsel, many individuals, and they are very much lawyers. Now, you're the only layman here, apart from the two gentlemen.
Yes.
That is, two lawyers and one economist. And I think it would be apt for me to pose this question to you. But I want to get a preclude to this. I recollect, with respect to Mr. Varanasuri as well as Dr. Mahana Mehva, who are very well-learned lawyers. I know Mr. Varanasuri appears free of charge as well on certain cases. So with a lot of respect to the two gentlemen here, I want to drag your attention to the statement that was made by Mr. Gomin Dayasri. When I posed a question to him on this very show, asking him, are the lawyers doing their job? He said, Shamir, the most corrupt are the lawyers. And when I posed a question from Mr. Chandra Jayaratna, who is the former chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, about how accountants should uphold the law, then he said, the accountants are governed through a regulation that is held worldwide. They have to be true to themselves and do the auditing in question with a lot of integrity. And then I debated with him about auditors and individuals. They will only be true to their companies in question. Now, my question to you is very simple. Given all this, as a layman, what is your thought? You know, there is ethics, there is regulations, and then there is law.
Yes.
There is a fine line between all three.
Yes.
So, where do you place all this?
I think I should touch on one issue that we were discussing here. That is this Mr. Marapana, Gamini Marapana appearing for perpetual treasuries. Now, as a layman, I think there is a professional conflict there, because the lawyer who was appearing for perpetual treasuries withdrew, stating that the client has not disclosed facts to him. Now, but this is good for this lawyer. He is conflicting his colleague who has withdrawn from the case because the client has not disclosed facts. He told it to the commission. Now, here is another lawyer jumping and taking that position. I see that as a professional conflict. I don't know, this is my layman's view.
I'd like one.
No,
Yes,
I mean, let me explain this. Yes,
No,
because it was bad for Mr. Nihal Fernando or Nihal Silva. I think Mr. Nihal Fernando. He openly said, I don't want to appear for a client like this. I mean, he may have been paid by this client a huge amount, but irrespective of all that, he decided to withdraw. Here is a lawyer coming and saying, oh, it doesn't matter whether he had disclosed or undisclosed, I am appearing for him. I see a big conflict there. I mean, where is the professionalism? Where are the ethics? I mean, you don't have to think about Vijayadasa Rajapaksa, you don't have to think about Mr. Marapana. Mr. Marapana's case is very clear, the Minister Marapana's case, because he appeared as a counsel, and he found he cannot defend him when the others are criticizing him. I mean, in his conscience, it was bad for him to either stand for him in the parliament also against his own colleagues. So what he said was, well, I am withdrawing. So he did it. It was a very gentlemanly affair. It was a different thing.
Yes, Mr.
May I have just 1 minute?
Yes,
to explain?
of course, yes, of course.
Possibly, I don't blame Rusi, but possibly because Rusi has not gone through months and months of training in professional ethics and integrity, which we go through before we become a lawyer.
That is a very
no, before we become,
term.
no, let me answer.
I will give you that.
Please, let me answer. Let me complete my answer, then you can come out with it. So, Rusiri has not gone through the subject called professional ethics and integrity. So, I am saying it may be difficult for him to understand. What Nihal Fernando told the press was that when the client retained him, he had not been told of these recorded tapes that found later when he was appearing for the client, came out in the commission, had been doctored. Nihal had not been told that. The first principle of a lawyer is when you take on a lawyer, you have to tell the lawyer the truth. So Nihal Fernando withdrew on the premise, I think, from what is reported, of that the client had not disclosed to him those details. Now, Marapana does not have to follow on the same conflict of interest, because the client may very well have, we don't know, the client may very well have disclosed to him, this I doctored the tapes. I don't know whether he did. So, the same conflict situation does not carry. You must understand the law of conflict. You follow? It is not conflict of interest that everyone thinks in a dictionary. That's a conflict of interest to a lawyer. It must be asked from a lawyer who has undergone professional ethics and conflict of interest to see what a conflict of interest it is a lawyer. To a layman, yes, it may be a conflict.
The question I posed to Mr.
No, but then you're posing a question to Mr. Tennakon which he can't answer because he's not a lawyer. You must ask a lawyer as to what a professional conflict of interest is. Otherwise, it's unfair to the viewer watching there. They might think, well, Nihal Fernando is good, Marapan is bad. That is not so. It's a conflict of interest if the client had not told you something when you took on a brief. Later on, it transpired. Well, say you come to me and say, I did not kill a person. Later on, during the trial, in the cell, when I go to visit you, say, no, actually, Krishmal, very good job, you defended me, but I did actually kill the man. Then I can't appear for you anymore because you have not disclosed the truth to me. Those situations cannot be compared. And also, Mr. Vijay Rajapaksa resignation was not on a conflict of interest. That was based on the breach of a collective responsibility in the cabinet. So we must get the facts straight when we discuss this. Otherwise, it's wrong. I'm not trying to defend lawyers. But what goes to the viewer becomes.
But at the end of the day, my question to Mr. Tennakon was on layman terms. Obviously, we know that
on layman terms, you must ask as a layman.
As a layman, that was the question, Mr. Rajapaksa. I don't agree with you here. I gave an opportunity.
You may not take this.
But I told Mr. Tennakon.
You can't ask a layman what a professional conflict of interest is to a lawyer. I disagree. I'm sorry. A professional conflict to a lawyer is not a professional conflict to a client.
Yeah, Mr. Rajapaksa, but at the end of the day, as layman, I told Mr. Tennakon,
as layman,
how does he view it?
You can't comment on it. As layman, you can't comment on it. That's my view. You may have a different view. Let's respect to disagree, but your question is wrong because a layman can't comment on what a conflict of interest is to a lawyer.
I think just one clarification to make here, just a brief one. Now, this conflict does not arise in the case of Mr. Gamini Marapana, apparently because of an assumption that the client has now disclosed matters to him. How do we know?
We don't know. That's
the thing. So we don't know. So that is why I am saying, unless he says he has disclosed everything to me, when he goes and appears for a person who has been rejected by another lawyer, this is how it appears to us.
A lawyer is not answerable to the general public. A lawyer is only answerable to his client.
Absolutely. We know that lawyers are...
we are not answerable to all and sundry to explain why we take on clients or why we refuse briefs. We are only answerable as officers of the court. You can observe anything. Lawyers are only answerable as officers of the court and to the client. That's it. Not even to God do we answer.
Absolutely, I agree with you. I think the fact of the matter is, I pose a question to Mr. Tennakon on the basis as a layman what he thinks.
As a layman, you can't comment on it.
Yeah,
but
the general public at the end of the day, you go to social media and you try to say that
can draw your opinion.
You say that to the people.
This is what a lawyer says. This is what a layman says.
In the absence of an explanation, I mean acceptable explanation, I still hold my view. There appears to be a conflict of professional conflict between the lawyers.
I respect Rusiri's view. I don't agree with it. The general public can draw your opinion.
Absolutely, Mr. Varuna Surya. That's what democracy is all about. You can express whatever view you want.
And we remain friends.
And still get away with it. We see that happening right across the board with the government, outside and so on and so forth. We're going for a short commercial break and we'll come back. It's the final round. This is Face the Nation, but one thing to keep in mind is the fact that you have people, then you have individuals, and then you have ethics and principles and regulations governing them. So ethically, would you do it? That's the question mark. So we're going for a short commercial break. Stay connected, stay with Face the Nation.